Welcome to World Chalice. Now, World Chalice is a very old deck. It was one of the first Link archetypes ever printed, and for its time it was pretty good. Eventually, like most decks, it fell off when better decks like Goki's came around. But, you know, it had its time to spotlight, and it has some neat gimmicks. It's very good at spamming monsters, especially non-effect monsters. And that specifically is very relevant with the recently revealed card, Ringowurm, the 100 Apple Dragon. One of the strongest tuners ever printed, and a card that screams, "We printed this after Hulk got banned for a reason." And in this deck profile, you'll see exactly why. So, to go over the star of the show, Ringowurm, the 100 Apple Dragon, is a light, level 2 dragon tuner with 100 attack and 1100 defense. And it has two main effects. The first one is that if a face-up non-effect monster is on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then, during your main phase, if you synchro summoned a synchro monster this turn, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 100 Apple token, which has the same stat line and type except for lower defense, you know, which means a lot. And then if you use this token as synchro material, you can treat it as a tuner, and both are hard once per turn effects. So how does the Ringowurm factor into this deck? Well, in World Chalice, you're running plenty of normal monsters. For example, Mystical Shine Ball, which you summon off Venus, is one of the core combos and best combo starters in the entire deck. Then cards like Chosen by the World Chalice are not hard to summon off something like Emergency Teleport or the floating effects of the World Chalice monsters. So getting Ringowurm on the field is not hard at all. And the payoff, well, for an example, if as a 2-card combo, if you just have Venus and Ringowurm, you can just from those 2 cards, and on Hyper Librarian, a level 8 Synchro, a level 2 monster on the field, and a Harpier Squadron in your hand to quick effect Synchro on the opponent's turn. And during that combo, you draw 2 cards off of Hyper Librarian. A very strong payoff. And that's just with those cards. You'll have 3 others in your hand. And so Ringwurm is a very flexible card, and I think has a good chance of making this deck a lot more powerful in the modern day. As for the rest of the World Chalice cards, I'll go over them pretty quickly as they're mostly pretty simple. The actual archetypal cards I'm running is Chosen by the World Chalice, just because it's a psychic level 3 normal monster, which works well with stuff like Emergency Teleport for extension. Then Lee the World Chalice Fairy, which when it's summoned, you can search a World Chalice monster, and if it's in the grave, you can send a monster from hand or field to grave to add it back to your hand. Then we have World Chalice Guard Dragon, which has a target protection, which is funny, but the main effect is that you can banish it from the grave to reborn a normal monster to a zone a Link monster points to. Then we have the sort of final main one is World Legacy World Chalice, a level 5 monster. There's a couple effects where it can, you know, interrupt monsters special from the extra deck, but the main thing is that if this normal summon or set card leaves the field, you can special summon 2 World Chalice monsters from your deck except for more copies of itself. And there's plenty of ways to tribute summon this card, and the payoff is just getting 2 monsters, and if you summon something like Lee and Guard Dragon, you can go like +4 off of that 1 card. Now as for the World Chalice adjacent cards I'm running in the main deck, Agent of Creation Venus might as well be an archetypal card for World Chalice, because it just lets you summon 3 Shine Balls from the deck, and if cards like Exodius, you can keep summoning more and more Shine Balls. It just lets you go plus a million and get plenty of normal monsters in the field, which is something that both World Chalice and Ringowurm want. As for other cards, I'm also running some World Legacy cards. For example, World Crown is a free special summon that can negate extra deck monster effects. I'm running the World Legacy spell traps of Succession and Sorrow to be searched off of something like, you know, Lieb, because Lieb is very strong in its deck, and as far as getting World Legacies in the grave, well, World Legacy World Chalice is one of your main combo starters, and so these are both very strong cards in this deck. As for the sort of generic support, I'm running Transmodify, which lets you send a face-up monster you control to the grave to special summon 1 from your deck that has the same type and attribute but 1 level higher, which in this case you can sack something like Lee for Agent of Creation Venus, which is very strong. I'm running Small World because it lets you search almost everything in the deck with almost everything, or bridges like Nibiru, Ash Blossom, and Veiler. And these are all very good cards in their own right, so having them as Small World bridges doesn't hurt at all. Emergency Teleport, as previously mentioned, lets you summon something like Chosen, Called by is just a good card. Triple attack works very nice in this deck as it helps it go second, play through hand traps, and you can draw some nice extenders. Exodius, as previously stated, lets you recycle shine balls, and it's another extender. And Hop Air Squadron is a search target off of one of the main sort of synchro combos, and lets you quick effect synchro on your opponent's turn. Very strong effect. And all the extra deck is where things get very interesting, because I'm running a ton of different synchros, notably Cupid Pitch, Herald of the Arclight, Hyper Librarian, Black Rose, and Omega. Now Omega and Black Rose can be replaced with basically any suitable level 8 and 7 synchros. I just thought they were the most interesting, and summoning Black Rose on the opponent's turn is very funny. But the important ones is Hyper Librarian and Cupid Pitch, as this makes the 2-card combo of Venus and the Apple Dragon very strong, because Hyper Librarian is how you draw a bunch of cards, and Cupid Pitch can be very easily summoned off something like the token of Ringowurm. And this is not only a good synchro tuner to go into a level 8 synchro or something like that, it also searches Hop Air Squadron off its effect, because Hop Air Squadron has 600 defense. So, they're a very strong lineup, and then Herald of the Arclight is good in case you don't have the Venus line. If you can just control a stray Shine Ball or something like that, you can go ahead and make a very strong and competent level 4 synchro. Now you notice in this side deck there's 2 different synchros. There's Geometric Magma and Baron de Fleur, because there is another sort of line you can go if you replace the level 8 Synchro Omega that I'm running with the Mathmech Magma and then run Baron de Fleur. You can do a line that lets you draw 3 cards and on Baron plus Librarian. But that does take up a lot more extra deck space, it's less flexible and generically good. But if you can find a space in the extra deck and you're willing to cut some of these link monsters, it's worth looking into because Baron is very strong. Speaking of link monsters, I'm running a bunch of different ones. Some you'll definitely recognize and some you probably won't. For example, I'm running Imduk the World Chalice Dragon and Eve the World Chalice Priestess as my main World Chalice links. Now you might think, if you are familiar with this deck, it's sacrilegious to not run the World Chalice Link 3. And honestly, I just don't think it's really good enough. As far as drawing a bunch of cards, Hyper Librarian does that just fine. Its removal effect is nice, but something like Lieb already removes cards pretty easy, and going second for this deck is already a struggle. And extra deck space is just so tight with the synchro package I couldn't really put it in. But Eve is strong because it's just a nice link 2 that's easy to summon, it gives protection to monsters it points to, and it has the nice World Chalice Link monster floating effect to summon a World Chalice from your hand. Now Imduk is the very strong one, that's what I'm running at too. So you can just use it with a normal monster, except a token, and it lets you normal summon an extra World Chalice monster. This is how you summon World Legacy World Chalice, and when it floats, it lets you summon from your hand. It also has a funny damage step effect, which maybe will come up. Now, Mirage is one of the best ways to trigger something like World Chalice, as you can just immediately link it up for Mirage and summon too. Link Spider is a way to get different names out of your normal monsters. Lieb lets you search the World Legacy spell traps, remove cards, it's a nice card. And any sort of boss monsters, Barrel Dragon is very flexible and strong in this deck. You get to summon, and you can either bounce opponent's cards or your own to record them. Then Access Kotaker is very good for OTKs. Appaloosa, very strong card, extremely easy to make in this deck, and so you is especially good in this deck when you can draw something like an Exodius to keep comboing off. So to actually show that 2-card combo I mentioned earlier, here's a hand of Venus and Ringowurm. Now to start off with, you of course normal summon Venus, and then summon a ton of different Shine Balls, all 3 from your deck. And being able to get this for just 1500 life points is very nice. And one thing to know about Venus is that it's pretty much immune to Ash Blossom, as if they Ash Blossom it, you can just do it again. Thing to note. And here we go ahead and pay life points, then summon Ringowurm. Then synchro off Ringowurm and Venus into Hyper Librarian, then use Ringowurm's Grave Effect to summon a token, in this case a level 2, and treating as a tuner along with a Shine Ball, summon Cupid Pitch. Increase Cupid Pitch's level, and draw off of Hyper Librarian. Then go ahead and synchro off Cupid Pitch and another Shine Ball for Omega, then trigger Librarian and Cupid Pitch. Searching off of Cupid Pitch, grab Hop Air Squadron, and draw an extra card. So, this is just a simple 2-card combo. And with the Hop Air Squadron, you can summon it and summon a Black Rose, you can summon a Herald of Arclight if you want to get a negate and draw a card off Librarian. Tons of things you can do. And, well, you drew these 2 extra cards, and there's also 3 extra cards in the hand anyways. So you could have tons of gas in your hand or some like hand traps or triple attack. So it's a pretty solid end board for how low card investment it was. So how about a full hand with all those cards? This is a hand consisting of World Chalice Guard Dragon, Venus, Emergency Teleport, chosen by the World Chalice, and Ringowurm. You start off with, as pretty much always with this deck, normal summon Venus, and just go ahead and trigger its effect to summon 3 Shine Balls. And afterwards pay the life points, and then summon Ringowurm. And just go through the pretty standard things of summoning the Hyper Librarian, summon the token, to make Cupid Pitch, just the usual. Increase its level, draw off of Hyper Librarian, then synchro these off for Omega, search off Cupid Pitch, draw an extra card. And the nice thing about Omega is it actually lets you avoid something like Nibiru. If your opponent didn't already Nibiru, you can dodge with Omega to at least have something on field. And then go ahead and leading with Emergency Teleport, summoning from the deck the other copy of Chosen. Then going ahead, linking off Chosen, making Imduk, and tribute summoning World Legacy World Chalice. Triggering Imduk to summon from my hand World Chalice Guard Dragon, and then linking off these 2 for an Ebe, and triggering World Chalice to summon from my deck 2 World Chalices, in this case Lee and Guard Dragon, triggering Lee to search from my deck to my hand, World Chalice, it doesn't really matter what you search, just something. And going ahead and linking these off for an Appaloosa, a 3 material one in this case, and triggering Eve to summon the World Chalice from my hand. Afterwards, we can go ahead and link these 2 off for a Lieb, and search from our deck the Counter Trap, which, if you didn't know, when a monster is co-linked that you control, it's an Omni-Negate Counter Trap. Then go ahead and use Guard Dragon's Fight in Grave, bring back a normal monster, use E-Telly to summon Chosen from our hand, and then go ahead and link all 3 of these off for Firewall Dragon. And this is the end. And this is a very strong end board. 3 material Appaloosa, a Firewall that can bounce 1 card from Field or Grave, Omega, and then hop your Squadron to quick effect synchro off the Hyper Librarian, and an Omni-Negate Counter Trap. Then, for follow-up, you have something like World Legacy World Chalice to insert a World Legacy Spell Trap from your deck. So this is a very good end board, and sure it is high commitment, but you basically win the game with this. So what do you do if you don't have Venus or Ringowurm? They're very strong and key to this deck, but you don't always draw them, and you don't always have access to Small World. Well, this is a hand that shows what you can do without any of them. In this case, it's Lee the World Chalice Fairy, Ash Blossom, World Legacy World Chalice, Emergency Teleport, and World Crown. So to start off, we'll go ahead and activate Emergency Teleport to summon from our deck Chosen, and then go ahead and link him off into an Imduk. We go ahead and tribute summon World Legacy World Chalice, trigger Imduk to summon Lee from our hand, to search from our deck to our hand Guard Dragon. Then we can go ahead and link off World Chalice for Almirage, trigger World Chalice, summon from our deck a Guard Dragon and another Lee. Go ahead and use these 2 to make Lieb, and trigger its effect to search the Reborn spell, as we need as much extension as we can with this hand. Then go ahead, and with this card, Succession, reborn a monster, in this case Imduk. Then we can go ahead and link these 3 off for an Appaloosa pretty early on, and trigger Imduk's effect to summon from my hand the Guard Dragon. Then we can go ahead and special summon World Crown, and use Guard Dragon's Grave effect to link all these off into a Firewall. So this board doesn't look amazing, that's because it's not stellar. It's a 3 material Appaloosa, a Bounce, and an Ash. But with even a slightly better hand, for example 1 extra extender, we could have ended on a Counter Trap, and this is a, well, not ideal hand. You want to at least see Venus or Ringowurm, but the deck doesn't instantly lose if it doesn't open them. So in conclusion, Ringowurm helps the deck a ton, gives it much more extension, much better end boards, and more consistency. But it doesn't really solve the core issues. The deck bricks, and it bricks bad. And Ringowurm can sometimes, lead to that. If you don't open access to a normal monster, Ringowurm just kind of sits there. And, well, the deck has a lot of tribute monsters, so like War Legacy War Chalice, Transmodify Sometimes Dead, and going second is an adventure that you don't want to take. You know, if you don't open Triple Attack or Nibiru, it might be a little rough. But at least it's more of a local viable deck now. It's solid and it's pretty fun to just combo off and figure out what lines you want to go through, especially with cards like Small World making you think outside of the box. So I would definitely recommend at least giving this deck a try if it looks interesting. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and feel free to leave any feedback you have in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see more in the future.